All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Leadupteach in partnership with Leadupchat on YouTube with myself, Heidi Veal, and my friends Laura Gilchrist and Elizabeth Bostwick. We are so excited about today's special live interview with Mr. Steve Barkley. I'm an assistant principal at a bilingual early childhood school in North Texas, and I also co-founded and co-moderate Leadupteach and ECE Chat. We are so thrilled for today's episode 18 of Leadupteach with Mr. Steve Barkley. He is an educator and consultant for over 30 years. He has served as an educational consultant with school districts, with teacher organizations, and with state departments of education and colleges and universities nationally and internationally, facilitating the changes necessary for them to reach students and successfully prepare them for the 21st century. He's a prolific published author, and his weekly blog, Steve Barkley Ponders Out Loud, has evolved into a go-to resource for teachers and administrators all over the world. Before we dive into the interview this morning, Elizabeth, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Bostwick, and I teach fourth grade in the Finger Lakes region of New York, and I'm super passionate about fostering a true love of learning within all students by immersing them in makerspace, project-based learning, passion projects, and really empowering them to ignite their shine. Laura, please take a minute and go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Laura Gilchrist. I'm an instructional coach in Kansas City at Turner High School. This is my second year. I taught middle school for 20 years. I'm passionate about learning, coaching, and leadership. I'm thrilled to welcome you, Mr. Barkley, on episode 18 of Leadupteach. Thank you for joining us today. Please go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hi, Steve Barkley, and I'm actually even got a few more years in than the introduction said. But currently, I live in Switzerland with my partner Michelle, who is a vice principal in a international school here in Basel, Switzerland. And when I'm not here in Switzerland, it's because I'm on the road in the States. Working with schools, mostly in the area of coaching and professional learning communities. And then when I'm back here at home in Switzerland, I do some work with international schools.
Well, thank you, Steve. We also want to give a special welcome to the Leadupchat community joining us for today's Saturday morning Leadupteach live interview, watching here on YouTube and chatting on Twitter.
Now this morning on our exciting 18th episode of Leadupteach in partnership with Leadupchat, we are thrilled to hear Mr. Barkley's passion for quality teaching in a culture of coaching.
Yes, and to get us started, Mr. Barkley, please share more with us about your journey that led you to be the inspiring educator that you are today with a passion for instructional coaching and PLCs.
My work with coaching goes all the way back to my introduction to teaching. I actually started teaching as a college senior in an experimental program that had me teaching in a fourth grade classroom with a master teacher, 2 student teachers, a graduate intern, and visiting professors. And I got to student teach from the beginning of September through June. So I spent an entire year where every lesson I taught was observed by someone, and it ended with picking up a cup of coffee and sitting down and getting feedback on what had happened. And then you spent the rest of the day watching other people teach and having those conversations with them. So that was my introduction to teaching. I then got my first job teaching in a public school. I taught on a 5th and 6th grade team, and it was open concept. So we had one giant room with 120 5th and 6th grade students in it. And it meant you were at least informally observed all the time. So if the lesson was going great, you could look around the room and spot somebody's eyes and they'd give you a thumbs up. And if you were struggling, you could look around the room and you knew there was somebody who had observed what happened. And at the end of the day, it would be that conversation. After 5 years at that 5th and 6th grade level, I transferred to teach 1st grade. And I taught for 5 years in a co-teach classroom. So Diane and I had a double classroom. We usually had a college intern working with us. We all, most of the times, had a paraprofessional. And so teaching had always been in that kind of an environment. As I began to work in professional development and teacher training and I began to travel, I was surprised to find that so many teachers had been working in isolation and that my past was just foreign to them. And that's what led my whole push to becoming engaged in seeing how I could bring that teacher coaching teacher format to more people.
Oh, that's powerful. You are incredibly knowledgeable about and experienced with coaching as a vehicle for inspiring high quality teaching. What is it about a culture of coaching that leads to transformative teaching and student learning? And as an instructional coach, I'm passionate about this conversation, this feedback you're talking about.
When I wrote the book, Quality Teaching and a Culture of Coaching, I was very purposeful on the title, that coaching be seen as a culture and not as an activity. Just this week, I'm working with an international school that's looking at implementing peer coaching. And my concern was they saw it as this program, kind of like one more thing we're adding to what we're doing. And I'm real big on coaching being a tool through which you accomplish the things you're working on. So if you're in professional development and you want to add a skill to your repertoire, coaching's the way to do it. If you're implementing a curriculum change, coaching is the way to do it. If there's new people joining a staff at a school, they get to know each other through coaching. If there's a student with a learning difficulty and I don't know what to do to assist the student, out comes the tool of coaching. If I can give you one of my most exciting examples with that was actually at Michelle's school here in Switzerland. After several years of working on building a coaching culture in her school, a new teacher came to the school, not a first-year teacher, but new to this setting. And after her third week on the job, she was told that she had a meeting and said that an autistic child was coming to the school and was going to be placed in her classroom. And within an hour of that meeting, she had sent an email out to everyone on the staff telling them that an autistic child was going to be joining her class and giving an open invitation during the next 2 weeks for people to observe in her classroom and leave her a note on anything they saw that was going to make it easy for this child to transition into her classroom and anything that they thought could be a problem. And as soon as I heard that, I went to Michelle's principal and I said, I want to shake your hand and congratulate you on the hiring that you do, but even more important, the culture that you created in the building. So somebody new to the building realized if there's a challenge in front of you, coaching would be the place to turn to address the problem.
And all of us are coaches. That's what I keep hearing from you.
Yeah,
It's everybody.
And when you take it back to instructional coaches, I frequently describe that the instructional coach should be the coach of coaching. So less critical that you provide all the coaching, but you organize and you support and assist to build that continuous coaching culture into the school.
What wonderful reflections. Mr. Barkley, we met this past December at a workshop that was in my area, and that day you shared about an article that you wrote on your blog titled, "There is no mountaintop in teaching," and also your insights about teaching in the learning community. Would you share more about your thoughts behind these two ideas and about how they relate to your stance on instructional coaching?
So let's go first to there is no mountaintop in teaching. To me, it's a unique profession to enter that you don't have to worry about retirement coming, or about mastery coming before retirement. Like what? How am I going to master this job, and then what will I do those years after mastery? I've frequently described it as, if you take everything you know about teaching and learning and you put it inside of a balloon, the outside of the balloon represents the areas for further study. So the more knowledgeable you become, the more skilled you become, it opens up a new area for you to study further. So if I'm introduced to project-based, I suddenly have all this new learning to do. If I go deeper into integrating technology into my classroom, I have this new learning to do. So that's that critical piece of there is no mountaintop. So teacher learning should be continuous. So then I think the other part of that teacher learning is that it be collaborative. And everything in my head says a teacher working individually today cannot meet the standards for learners that they're being asked to meet. So teaching has to occur as a team. So as I played that out, teams require high levels of trust. And I can't figure out how teachers could work in isolation and then develop that kind of trust with their colleagues. So I went forward with the phrase, teaching needs to become more of a public act. So the teaching that I do needs to be public to my colleagues, because that's what will cause the trust to be built. So if you're asking teachers to work on a middle school team, it means the math and science teachers have to be in the language arts classroom. If you're asking a teacher to be a reading specialist and she's going to be taking students from a classroom teacher, sometimes the classroom teacher has to see the reading specialist work. And sometimes the reading specialist has to see the classroom teacher work. And that's where that rapport will be built. So as I've worked more and more with professional learning communities in the last set of years, I've seen the ever increasing link between coaching and professional learning communities. If teachers are peer coaching in each other's classrooms between the times that they're functioning in that professional learning community decision making, it moves everything ahead much stronger.
That's so true. And Mr. Barkley, just as you're sharing, the benefits of coaching are endless, and they truly involve trust within a team to take place. So we would love to hear too, what are some ways, or just even some of your favorite ideas or strategies for coaching that lead to transformational teaching and student learning on a routine basis?
I guess that I have a blog that's just going to post tomorrow on 4 tenets of peer coaching. And I think those 4 kind of jump out in answer to your question as a starting point. So the first one is to establish the belief that all teachers deserve a coach. And I actually chose to move away from all teachers needing a coach to all teachers deserving a coach. And you deserve a coach because of the complexity of the work that you do. And you deserve a coach because you ought to have a chance to celebrate the things that are happening in your classroom. And so when those great learning moments with kids happen and somebody else was there to see it, that's a reward we should all get. The second element that I suggested was all teachers should have a growth plan, and that requires feedback, and that requires coaching. So if my expectation is that every teacher has somewhere in their mind that they're headed in their own growth, then they need the opportunity to get the feedback. The third, which I think is really critical here, is the understanding that the best teachers should be receiving the most coaching. And that's the reverse of the culture that most systems put into play. That first couple of years of teaching, everybody's in your classroom giving you feedback, and then the way you know you're doing a great job is people ignore you. That needs to be reversed. Now, the reason I want the best teachers observed the most is that the observers are doing the learning. So you want your most outstanding teachers' classrooms to be places where people are constantly in and out of. The problem is we tend to make those model classrooms, and then we tell the other teachers, this is a model and this is what you should go do. I find that doesn't create the right mental set. But if instead your strongest teachers are asking other teachers to come and observe and provide them with feedback, that really can change the mindset of the teacher coming in. So the people who are doing the observe me strategy now, which is the teacher leaves the note hanging on the door, says, I'd love to have somebody observe third or fourth period, and here's the form I'd like you to fill in while you're observing. That's really powerful. And then lastly, you build the culture of coaching with your teacher leaders. And in my mind, teacher leaders are people who will make themselves vulnerable before the trust has been built. So when the teacher leaders are inviting people into their classrooms and modeling that openness to coaching, that begins to create the cultures then for everyone else to join in.
Wow. So did you say that blog post is?
We'll post tomorrow. Yeah, it'll post tomorrow.
I love all that. And number 3, I want to really work. I've got some thoughts on that. You often share about the difference between a PWC and a PLC. Will you elaborate on the difference between the two and how authentic PLCs collaborate to answer the question, what do the students need us to learn?
Yeah, I wrote a blog that got me started on this about a year ago, and it was called Administrators Supporting or Hijacking PLCs. And what I was finding happens is there's jobs that have to get done, and so the caring administrator is feeling badly about all the pressures on teachers. They see this job that has to get done, and so the question is, when can we get that done? And the answer frequently became professional learning community time. So I got this time where the grade level is going to be together. I've got this time the department's going to be together. Here's the request from the state departments, or here's the request from the district office. So we'll take care of it during that time. And what I found missing was teachers were seeing professional learning communities as a place where they collaborated with their colleagues to get work done. Okay, and so that's a good thing. So I was real important. I didn't want people to see that as a bad thing. So I started labeling it as a professional working community. Okay, there's going to be an open house. We have to do an activity for all the grade 3 kids. And so the grade 3 PLC comes together and figures out what we're going to do with that. That's a professional working community. A professional learning community is when we say we aren't getting the student achievement results from our English language learners that we want to get. Therefore, we need to learn something. And I work off the assumption that if we knew what to do to get better results, we'd have done it. So anytime the teachers sit down and they look at student work or they look at student assessment and they say, we'd like this to be better, then the understanding is we need to learn something. So maybe we need to learn another strategy to teach it. It may mean we need to learn what supports the student needs. It may mean we need to learn how to create a motivation for that particular group of students. But whatever it is, it's around a learning element. So when I found that word of professional working community, I found out that many schools are established that teachers only have this one block of time, and they have both those tasks to get done. So I found out it helps if at least we said, okay, we got a 45-minute meeting. The first 15 minutes is PWC. Here's 3 or 4 things that just landed on our plate that we have to get done. We're going to take the last 20 minutes and that's when we're our PLC. Now, what needs to happen then is what you're doing in the professional learning community has to stay on the table long enough. So the biggest problem I found, especially with elementary schools, is that the PLCs tackle too many different things. So every meeting they're, last week we looked at reading, and next week we're looking at kids' writing scores, and 2 weeks later we got math out on the table, and they're not staying with anything long enough. So I'm pushing them, pick one thing. It's these 8 students that are going to be our focus and raising their scores. Or example, I'm working with a middle school. It's a math, English, science, social studies teacher. They chose as their PLC improving student writing. So they picked 20 kids from top writers down to most struggling writers, but they picked 20 kids out of the 120 7th graders that their team is working with. And every PLC, they have some of those 20 students writing on the tables, goal setting, strategizing, assessing, with the understanding that whatever you're learning with those 20 kids, you'll be able to apply to others. But it's getting that narrowed down focus. So I'm big on administrators asking a teacher, tell me one of the more recent things you've learned in your PLC and how it's impacted your teaching. And if people can't talk about things they've learned, then it wasn't a PLC.
I really like your focus on the work and the learning, because that just gets all mashed together, and the learning is what typically gets lost.
Yeah, because the work is going to have a deadline.
Right.
Next thing you know, there isn't learning occurring that's new. And if you thought about it as it's really collaborative learning. It's a group of teachers sitting down and saying, we don't have the answer to this. Now, we may bring in instructional coaches, we may bring in some curriculum specialists, we may go gather research. Those things will fuel us in coming up with an experiment. But now the critical part is we need to run the experiment and look at the results of the experiment. That's where the learning is going to occur.
So then researching as well, collaborative. I'm running with this. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I love hearing the differentiation between the two.
Absolutely. I think that final question that you just shared was so powerful. Tell me one more recent thing you've learned in your PLC and how it's impacted your teaching and student learning. That right there is a huge takeaway for me for today's conversation, and really looking at the learning that the PLC is doing together. And knowing that deep level learning is only going to happen because of the vulnerability and trust that exists, and that it's that community piece.
So let me give you one more piece with that to lay back from the administrator level. And I frequently say to school administrators, the way you know you have high functioning PLCs is they're continually causing problems for you.
Asking questions,
right.
pursuing, probing, absolutely.
A high functioning PLC is going to say, these kids' needs aren't being met by this existing program, so we need a modification. The time structure isn't what these kids need, so we need a change. But so when you talk about where does transformation and innovation, it comes from solving problems. And in that solving those problems, you're going to continually be identifying something in the existing system that's coming up short.
That is profound. You're exactly right about that. So as we're nearing the end of our conversation today, which I feel like could just continue on for such a much longer time, if you could share maybe one final thing that you would like educators to walk away with today or go out to do and make a difference, what would it be?
I'm more and more driving the point with folks to recognize that the outcome of learning comes from what the students do, not from what the teacher does. So that I've been using the phrase, students cause student learning, not teachers don't cause student learning, students cause student learning. So the really difficult task of teachers is, one, to identify what are the student behaviors that would produce the learning outcomes that we want. So most of my coaching time has totally shifted from being in classrooms and watching teachers to being in classrooms and watching kids. Now, when you take that back to the PLC, then it's the hard work for the PLC. If we want kids to develop this value and belief system, if we want kids to leave a course more excited about what they haven't learned than what they have learned. So how do you leave a course so that you've learned so much it makes you want to learn more? So if that's the outcome I want, what do kids have to be experiencing during the learning? Now I'm ready to back up and say, okay, what is it that I as a teacher would do to get those student behaviors? And I think the dialogue between teachers, the dialogue in PLCs, the dialogue and the work with an instructional coach, it is mostly based upon, I'll wrap it up in a phrase for you that I like to give folks. The teacher's goal is to have the greatest number of kids spend the largest amount of time engaged in the most appropriate learning activity. Okay, a goal we'll never meet, but it's what we're always striving for. So when I invite my instructional coach in, can you spot anywhere where there's students who aren't spending the greatest amount of time engaged in the most appropriate learning activity? In which case, what change or modification can we as a team of teachers make? Can I as an individual teacher make to cause more of that to happen?
That's excellent. You're giving me so many different things to think about. And as we wrap up, please share what's coming up in the near future for you, and also how our listeners can continue to connect with you.
Well, coming up in the near future is retirement. I am looking to spend more time here at home in Switzerland, which though has me moving more of my work to Skype. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I'm working with a school in China right now where I did 2 staff trainings by Skype on PLCs, mm-hmm. and now I'm set up next month to be observing and coaching their PLCs. I'm working with a district in London where I'm working with the instructional coaches, and so we can Skype in for 90 minutes and work. So that's a whole new learning piece for me, but finding it quite amazing as to how facilitative and how engaged you can be and not be a talking head. So that's new for me. On my website, which is barkleypd.com, you'll find the blogs, and I'd encourage anyone listening with questions to send them in. I promise you I'll answer them. You'll get some free support from me, but in exchange I'll get the next blog. So the one that I shared that is posting tomorrow is because I got a note from an instructional coach who was struggling with a group of teachers who are fine. They have nothing that they could value from working with the instructional coach, and it was in writing to her that turned into that blog. You'll also find on that site, I probably have about 20 short video clips that are 6 to 10 minutes long on different topics connected to PLCs and coaching, and people can find that a helpful resource in some of the PD that you're conducting.
Well, I will be tweeting at you on Twitter after I dig into this. I've really, really connected with what you talked about today, and I'm excited to look into it. Thank you, Steve, for joining us on Leadupteach today. We know everyone enjoyed hearing about your personal journey and all you're doing to influence teaching and learning around the globe. Also, thank you to the amazing audience who tuned in today on Leadupteach.
Thank you.
And we want to encourage, pardon.
Go ahead, just my pleasure. It was great.
Well, it's been our pleasure to Mr. Barkley. We want to encourage everyone to be on the lookout for the link to today's live interview, to feel free to share it out and replay it and rewatch it. I know I will be. There were so many nuggets I want to go back and think about and reflect on for future learning.
I agree. I'm right there as well, Heidi. We're also excited to announce the next date and time of our upcoming Leadupteach episode, and want everyone to go ahead and mark their calendars for episode 19, featuring Makerspace pioneer and expert Laura Fleming, who also authored Worlds of Making.
And between now and our next episode, we encourage you to follow those you connected with today on Twitter or YouTube, and tweet using the Leadupteach hashtag on Twitter. We are signing off. Thanks again, Steve. Goodbye, all. Lead on and lead up.
Thank you.